Martin Luther King Jr. was an African-American church leader and he was the son of early civil rights activist. Treating men equally is what is upheld by the thoughts of American Constitution and we want to live up to it. Martin Luther King Jr. says that he has a dream where his children are not judged by the color of their skin but by the content of their character, how they behave. Hello students, welcome back to the class. I am Anil, Assistant Professor of English, Vidhyaashram First Grade College, the Temple of Excellence. Today we are going to discuss a speech by Martin Luther King Jr. I Have a Dream, prescribed by the University of Mysore for the students of 3rd semester B.BA. Before we move on to the speech, let us know about the speaker, Martin Luther King Jr. Martin Luther King Jr. was born in the year 1929 and he was assassinated in the year 1968. He was an American Baptist, a social reformer, an activist, one of the most prominent leaders in the civil rights movement from 1955 until his assassination in 1968. Martin Luther King Jr. was an African-American church leader and he was the son of early civil rights activist, Minister Martin Luther King Sr. The King advanced the civil rights for people of color in the United States through nonviolence and civil disobedience. He was inspired by his Christian beliefs and nonviolence activism of Mahatma Gandhi. He was influenced by Mahatma Gandhi and his way of satyagraha. He led targeted nonviolent resistance against Jim Crow laws and other forms of discrimination. In United States of America, after Civil War, which succeeded the American freedom movement or the American independence, Martin Luther King Jr.'s I Have a Dream speech is one of the most celebrated oratory pieces in American history. So the speech which he gave in American capital, Washington, D.C. is even today considered as one of the most influential speeches. He delivered the speech from the steps of the Lincoln Memorial in Washington, D.C. on August 28, 1963 as the final speech of the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom of Colored People. His friend Philip Randolph and Bayard Rustin, they organized the march to advance for civil and economic rights for Black Americans, which was among the largest political rallies for human rights in history, attracting approximately 250,000 attendants. So this speech and this civil rights activists, they had a protest against discrimination of American Black people. They led a march against Jim Crow laws, which segregated people on the basis of the color of the skin. This was a successful march and it attracted 250,000 people to protest against the law. So before we understand what this speech is about, we have to have a little knowledge of events such as Emancipation Proclamation, which was declared in the year 1863. When America got independence in the year 1776, there was slavery in America. There was discrimination. The whites people, or the whites, the people of white skin, particularly from England, they declared independence. Slavery was rampant. People from Africa were brought as slaves to the United States. They were made to work in the fields of sugarcane, tobacco, cotton, etc. because they wanted to cut the cost of labor. So Emancipation Proclamation, which was declared by the famous American President Abraham Lincoln in the year 1863, is very important. It was a presidential proclamation and executive order issued by the United States President Abraham Lincoln on January 1st, 1863 during the Civil War. The proclamation changed the status of many slaves. More than 3.5 million enslaved African Americans in the secessionist Confederate States from enslaved to free. It changed their legal status. All African American people who were brought from Africa to work in the fields of America as slaves, they were declared free. We have to understand what is American Civil War is about before we understand the speech. It was fought between the Union, the northern part of America, and the Confederacy, the South, the latter formed by the states that had ceded. United States of America had 13 states in the beginning and they merged and today they have 51 states, which is reflected in their national flag by 51 stars. So here, when the Civil War broke out, the issue of slavery was brought in order to make people free from slavery. The people who had industrial revolution, the northern part of America, they did not like the slavery practiced in southern states. The central cause of the war was the dispute over whether slavery would be permitted to expand into the western territories, leading to more slave states, or be prevented from doing so, which was widely believed would place slavery on a course of ultimate extinction. So this was the main issue. Should slavery spread to the western states of America or not? When Abraham Lincoln declared Emancipation Proclamation, most of the slaves were legally freed from slavery. Again, there was something called Jim Crow laws. It was the legal backing of keeping blacks and whites separate in the public. Jim Crow laws in various states required the segregation of races in such common areas as restaurants and theaters. The separate but equal stand established by the Supreme Court in Plessy 5. It was supported by the justice system as well. Therefore, this enraged people, the justice system supporting slavery. Therefore, the blacks people, they came together and they started protesting the legal backing of a law which separated people on the basis of skin color. So coming to the speech, I Have a Dream, Martin Luther King makes an attempt and he was successful. He makes an attempt to remake the government, the justice system, to understand the flaw in their law and unfair thoughts in their decision. And this is a public speech that was delivered by American civil rights activist and Baptist minister Martin Luther King Jr. during the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom on August 28, 1963. What were their demands? He says, in a sense, we have come to our nation's capital to cash a check when the architects of our republic wrote the magnificent words of the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence. They were signing a promissory note to which every American was to fall heir. When Emancipation Proclamation was declared by Abraham Lincoln, it was a promissory note for all people of America, whites and blacks alike. This note was a promise that all men, black men as well as white men, would be guaranteed the unalienable rights of life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. So he starts his speech by telling about Emancipation Proclamation, a promise which was made to people of America, all blacks and whites together. It is obvious today that America has defaulted on this promissory note. So what is his tone? What is his concern here? Emancipation Proclamation was made in the year 1863, but the time here is 1963. Even after 100 years, the promise was not fulfilled. It is obvious today that America has defaulted on the promissory note insofar as her citizens of color are concerned. Instead of honoring the sacred obligation, America has given the Negro people a bad check. What is a bad check? Emancipation Proclamation. Martin Luther King is comparing that Emancipation Proclamation to a bad check. A check which has come back marked insufficient funds. You may all know what is bouncing of a check. So he says this promissory note is like a bad check and it has come back marked insufficient funds. Then he calls for a peaceful protest. After making the people and the government understand the issue, he calls for a peaceful protest. Why? Because he was influenced by the techniques of Mahatma Gandhiji, non-violence, satyagraha. He used this powerful weapon, satyagraha. But there is something that I must say to my people who stand on the warm threshold which leads into the palace of justice. So they are demanding justice. They are entering the palace of justice. In the process of gaining our rightful place, we must not be guilty of wrongful deeds. Let us not seek to satisfy our thirst for freedom by drinking from the cup of bitterness and hatred. Let us not commit anything which harms the society, which harms the integrity of people, which harms the brotherhood that they wanted to establish in the society. We must forever conduct our struggle on the high plane of dignity and discipline. We must not allow our creative protest to degenerate into physical violence. Martin Luther King Jr. says their creative protest should not degenerate into a physical violence. So moving 250,000 attendants is no joke. So he wanted all of them to behave properly, keep their integrity, and then move forward peacefully. Again and again, we must rise to the majestic heights of meeting physical force with soul force. This is what Gandhi says. Martin Luther King Jr., he repeats the words of Gandhi. We should fight the physical force with soul force. Moving on, there is a list of things to be done. What should be done? There are those who are asking the devotees of civil rights, when will you be satisfied? Whenever we start something, there are people who ask questions like why. So here is the answer. We can never be satisfied as long as the Negroes are the victims of the unspeakable horrors of police brutality. Recently, we might have heard about a person, George Floyd, who was a victim of police brutality. When Emancipation Proclamation was declared in 1863, all people believed that equality would be established in the society. But even after 100 years, there was police brutality. White people who were in the police force, they were treating the black people as prisoners. So he says, until it stops, we are not satisfied. We can never be satisfied as long as our bodies, heavy with fatigue and travel, cannot gain lodging in the motels of the highways and the hotels of the cities. He says blacks were not given rooms in the hotels and motels. We travel, we are all human beings, we feel fatigue. But when we are very tired, if we don't get place to rest, why? Because of the skin color. Therefore, Martin Luther King says, until we get a place to rest, we will not stop protesting against these discriminative laws. We cannot be satisfied as long as the Negroes' basic mobility is from a smaller ghetto to a larger one. Black people were not allowed to gather. Therefore, he says, until we are permitted to gather freely in any part of United States, we are not going to stop this war. We can never be satisfied as long as our children are stripped of their selfhood and robbed of their dignity by signs stating for whites only. He states boards like these for whites only. They discriminate. They do harm to our dignity, self-respect. Until these boards are removed physically and from the psychology of people, we won't stop this protest. We cannot be satisfied as long as a Negro in Mississippi cannot vote and a Negro in New York believes he has nothing for which to vote. Blacks did not have voting rights and they did not know what is voting. They were put poll taxes. They had to pay to the government in order to register as a voter and to vote, select their representatives. So Martin Luther King says, until they are made to realize the importance of voting and given the right to vote freely as the subjects of United States of America, we are not going to stop. No, we are not satisfied, and we will not be satisfied until justice rolls down like waters and righteousness like a mighty stream. So Martin Luther King says, until justice rolls down, until justice is served, we are not going to stop this protest. What is the dream of Martin Luther King Jr.? He expresses his dream. What is he dreaming? What are the aims of this march against Jim Crow laws which highlight and uphold discrimination? He says, let us not wallow in the valley of despair. I say to you today, my friends, and so even though we face the difficulties of today and tomorrow, I still have a dream. It is a dream deeply rooted in the American dream. The American dream is a famous phrase where people attempt to reach America and achieve success in their life. But what happened in America, the people who are staying in America, who are part of America, they don't have a rightful place in their own land. So he says, I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. Treating men equally is what is upheld by the thoughts of American Constitution, and we want to live up to it. I have a dream that one day on the red hills of Georgia, the sons of former slaves and the sons of former slave owners will be able to sit down together at the table of brotherhood. So he wants the future generation, the people who were the children of slaves and children of slave owners, they should get to a table of brotherhood, sit with each other, share the bonding. This is what is my dream, tells Martin Luther King Jr. I have a dream that one day even the state of Mississippi, a state boiling with the heat of injustice, boiling with the heat of oppression, will be transformed into an oasis of freedom and justice. Most of these things are clearly seen in the state of Mississippi, where slaves were treated like animals. So he says, I have a dream that one day Mississippi will be an oasis of justice and freedom. I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. Martin Luther King Jr. says that he has a dream where his children are not judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character, how they behave, what are their thoughts, and how they are. And they do not consider the skin of the color. It is the character in them that speaks about the people. He says, I have a dream that one day down in Alabama, with its vicious racists, with its governor having his lips dripping with the words of interposition and nullification, one day, right there in Alabama, little black boys and black girls will be able to join hands with little white boys and white girls as sisters and brothers. He says, in Alabama, there is a government which separates people with the legal backing. And there I want to see all black children and all white children coming together as the subjects of United States. He says, I have a dream. Therefore, what should be done in order to achieve this dream of unity between whites and blacks? I have a dream that one day every valley shall be exalted and every hill and mountain shall be made low. The rough place will be made plain and the crooked plains will be made straight. The glory of the Lord shall be revealed and all flesh shall see it together. So where he says, wherever there is a hindrance to achieve unity, let it be destroyed. Let us come together and live as one. This is our hope and this is the faith that I go back to the South with. So he wants to move to the states, southern states of United States of America. So this is what he says. With this message, I go to the southern states of America. With this faith, we will be able to heave out of the mountain of despair a stone of hope. With this faith, we will be able to transform the jangling discords of our nation into a beautiful symphony of brotherhood. With all these thoughts, with all the understanding of injustice, changing it to a just law, we will move to a place where there is hope. Within this faith, we will be able to work together, to pray together, to struggle together, to go to jail together, to stand up for the freedom together, knowing that we will be free one day. He expresses his faith. He expresses the hope in them. One day, all the wrongs would be made right. Following the speech, what happened? This speech influenced many white peoples to join the mass. Many blacks joined the protest. Whites and blacks, people of whites. So, what happened after the speech? Many people were influenced by the speech of Martin Luther King Jr. They joined the protest and this protest was successful. King was named Time Magazine's Man of the Year in 1963 after the speech, which influenced millions of Americans. A recording of I Have a Dream has been added to the United States National Recording Registry, and a line from the speech, out of a mountain of despair, a stone of hope, is inscribed on Martin Luther King Jr.'s memorial in Washington, D.C. So these are the contents of Martin Luther King's speech. He tried to influence the people of America. He wanted to motivate the Negro people. He wanted to bring the notice of justice system to their faults. Therefore, this speech is very important in the history of America and also in the history of the world, which speaks about universal brotherhood when seen from the holistic view. With this speech, we understand that the right thoughts and equal rights for all men in any country is very important. Discrimination will spoil nation and it poisons the psychology of human beings and it destroys a nation. With these thoughts in mind, we shall meet in the next class. Thank you.